Here is a presentation about system and data migration projects. It is created by Amy Law, based on her experience in managing migration projects. We will give an introduction about Amy Law and her experience on system and data migration projects. Her projects include the external SharePoint migration from one vendor to another, external SharePoint process, remedy upgrade and migration from a vendor to an in-house environment, Intranet Content Management, land system migration from mainframe to web-based application, and mainframe system retirement. Hey, this is Amy Law, your presenter. I have been working in IT for over 20 years in pipelines, energy regulator, oil and gas, utilities, transportations, and telecommunications. I have managed projects for over 15 years in IT applications and infrastructure, system and data migration, cybersecurity, ECM, SAP, process improvement, and office facilities. In terms of education, I completed bachelor and master in computer science from the University of Calgary. I received my PMP in 2006. I also completed certifications in project management, change management, ISO 27001, Information Security Management System, and ITIL. One of my most interesting migration projects is the external SharePoint migration project. My client had over 100 SharePoint sites with 3,500 user accounts. The users included the internal staff, affiliates, and external vendors. The sites were hosted by an off-site vendor. However, the vendor decided to move away from the hosting business in 3 months. This became a major issue to my client. How could we move the external SharePoint site, user accounts, files, and data to a new hosting platform in 3 months? A project was initiated with a mandate to complete the migration without business disruption. This also included communications and education to staff, affiliates, and external users about the new SharePoint location through information sessions, WebEx, emails, and Service Desk support. I managed the external SharePoint migration project from initiation to closing. We engaged over 50 site administrators and worked with a new vendor from inception to finalizing master service agreement. We selected and engaged the new vendor who had experience on this type of migration. We created a test strategy to ensure quality of the migration. We first selected 10% of the SharePoint site for thorough testing, including the validation on the site structure, user access, data, files, and contents. We selected an additional 5% of the SharePoint site for a high-level validation on site structure and user access. We reviewed the test result with senior management for final sign-off. In less than 3 months, we migrated 100 SharePoint sites and associated active user accounts from one vendor to another. We delivered ahead of schedule and under project budget without a service interruption. This project helped the client to reduce the operational cost because the new vendor service fee was 20% lower. In addition, we took the opportunity to cleanse legacy site and contents, further reducing the operational cost. Here is a highlight of the external SharePoint migration project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. Teamwork was the #1 reason to the success of this project. Everyone in the team was flexible, accommodating, caring, committed, and trusting. As the project timeline was aggressive, the project team was willing to work a few extra hours each week. The go-live had to be scheduled for Saturday and Sunday so that there was no business disruption. As an example of a strong team, we talk about traveling and vacation when we had team lunch during the go-live weekend. Sure enough, we coordinated our holidays and traveled to Asia after the project completion. It was fun. Another positive learning from this project was the engagement with the site administrators. Since each SharePoint site had the specific business requirements, it was critical to understand the impact of the move. The site administrators were willing to clean their websites through archiving old documents and participating in validation. Since there were over 3,500 user accounts, we had to conduct multiple information sessions. The payoff was great, as the communication about the new site location was made clear and the go-live date was provided well in advance so that users could make arrangements ahead of the go-live weekend. Last but not least, the site administrators completed content validation and cleaning before the migration, making the move a lot more efficient and faster. Since the project had an aggressive schedule, we had to quickly select a new vendor for hosting the SharePoint site. Through professional references, we were able to identify a new vendor who had completed the same type of migration and provided similar hosting services. The vendor was able to come up with a migration strategy quickly based on their previous projects. Nothing can substitute experience. Here is a number of negative findings, and this situation should be minimized and/or avoided in the future projects. As a lessons learned, we always should be aware of the technology options. In this case, the vendor decided to move out of the hosting business. We should always have a backup plan should and when a vendor decided to move out unexpectedly. It was clear that there was no SharePoint site process and procedure to grant and remove user access permission. Therefore, many user accounts were active, but the users were no longer working with the vendors. In some cases, the vendor account was not used by the named individual, leading to data security risk. As a result, a new project was initiated to create external SharePoint process and procedure to manage user account and access permission. Similarly, there was no governance to manage the SharePoint site structure and file naming convention. Therefore, some of the sites had broken links, and some files' names were too long for hyperlink reference. As a result, a new project was initiated to create SharePoint governance to manage site structure, file naming convention, and other key processes to ensure efficient use of the information solution and collaboration. Another interesting project was the external SharePoint Process project. My client had over 100 SharePoint sites with 3,500 user accounts. However, there was no process or procedure to manage user access permission. There was no governance to manage site structure and file naming convention. Any changes to the external SharePoint could be a challenge without the appropriate management on user access and site structure. A project was initiated with a mandate to create external SharePoint process, procedure, and governance to align with cybersecurity and regulatory policies. This also included communications and education to staff, affiliates, and external users. I managed the project from initiation to closing. Specifically, we engaged over 7 areas, including compliancy, legal, security, business information, IS, and so forth. We collected requirements using SharePoint Survey, which is a cost-effective way to collect input. We successfully overcame challenges such as conflicting interests, operational priorities, and organizational change management through weekly scrum with key stakeholders and monthly steering committee meetings with managers. We created external SharePoint process, procedure, and governance to align with security and regulatory policies. This included non-disclosure agreement, strong password format, and password reset. A non-disclosure agreement is also known as confidentiality agreement, which is a legal contract between a client and external vendor that outlines confidential material and knowledge as they use the external SharePoint to collaborate and share files. This also included the mandate to ensure user account created for external vendor was used by the named individual. We created new request forms to create new site and retire old site. We also created new request forms to add, delete, and modify user account. Last but not least, we created a 3-tier support process and procedure with service desk, information management support, and vendor. Here is a highlight of the external SharePoint Process project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. The 3-tier support model was effective. We leveraged support desk as the first tier as much as possible. This is the organization's first line of defense. They solved basic issues like password reset or user problems using FAQ and user guide. When the user issue is beyond the skill of the Tier 1, the issue elevated to Tier 2, which was the information management team. Finally, Tier 3 is the uppermost level of support in a technical support model accountable for resolving the most difficult issues. It is also known as the back-end support, which was resigning with the vendor. In our case, we were able to reduce the information management workload because most of the calls were addressed by Tier 1, and we rarely need to contact the vendor. The project transition was completed thoroughly and successfully. This included support manual, defect tracking system, user guides, briefing note, operational level agreement with infrastructure team, service level agreement with vendor, vendor maintenance cost, software licensing, SOX compliancy, IS release management, and support rotation schedule. They were signed by IS collaboration, business information, communications, data security, IS governance, SharePoint site administrators, procurement, and service desk, signifying alignment across various teams. We applied an effective organizational change management with the change model covering awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. We successfully make the inference to adopt the process, procedure, and governance. We help the client to enable compliancy with the codes of conduct and privacy policy. Here is a number of negative findings, and this situation should be minimized and/or avoided in the future projects. It was impossible to come up with an automated validation to ensure user account created for external vendor was used by the named individual. We could only leverage the signed contract to regulate the vendor. Similarly, the non-disclosure agreement was signed at the beginning when the SharePoint site was created with the external vendor. There is no automated validation to ensure the agreement is followed by the external users. My client had a challenge to work with an external vendor who hosts a remedy system for the service desk. The remedy system version was outdated. Some of the new functionalities from the latest version were not available. My client did not have a control over the Service Desk tool, leading to a request for change. A project was initiated to upgrade Remedy to the latest version and migrate data from a vendor location to an in-house environment. I managed the project from planning to closing, including vendor resource management, communications, and transition. At the end, we upgraded Remedy and aligned Service Desk to ITIL, the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. For example, we improved foundation data and incident resolution at the level 1 for over 2,500 users. This reduced the workload of the operational team, who was considered at the Tier 2 support. We also transitioned the Remedy product to operational team by involving support resources throughout the deployment. Here is a highlight of the Remedy upgrade and migration project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. One of the benefits to host the Service Desk tool in-house was to regain the control so that my client can upgrade system at their own schedule. This enabled my client to leverage the new functionalities from the latest tool based on its priority and schedule. In addition, the tool upgrade included security patches that reduced security risk. The in-house Service Desk provided a higher quality of the services and reduced operational cost. Before the migration, my client was charged by the vendor based on the number of service calls and not how soon and how well the service calls were solved. The project team was co-located. As such, everyone in the team had a chance to interact on a daily basis, increasing effective communications. For example, we could see body language as we conduct status review. We could further the team networking by having team lunch together with the operational staff. Here is a number of negative findings, and this situation should be minimized and/or avoided in the future projects. As a result of the migration, my client had to hire additional staff for sustainment. This consumed a headcount and an opportunity cost to other business priorities. My client decided to reduce contractor rate by 10% due to the economic recession. Some of the contractors were not happy with the rate reduction and decided to leave before the project go live. This had an impact to the project resource retention and continuity. My client had a challenge to manage Intranet Content Management. Some of the contents were outdated by months and even years. Due to the high turnover, analysts responsible to update and archive contents had moved on, and new analysts were not trained to keep the intranet content up to date. Therefore, intranet contents were outdated and misleading to unnecessary service calls. Manual changes on the intranet was no longer workable. Intranet technology was not kept up to date. A new project was initiated to upgrade intranet to Microsoft Office SharePoint Server. The new SharePoint platform enabled functionalities such as publishing and archiving of the content based on a scheduled cycle. The archiving was pre-scheduled at the time when the content was published. This increased user productivity and efficiency. I managed the project from initiation to execution. We engaged over 10 business clients, including communications and business information. We hired contractors to address changes on technical migration and change management. We created poster and arranged classroom trainings to use the new SharePoint tool on content management. The project was able to complete the system testing in development and user acceptance testing in quality environment. However, The deployment to production environment encountered a major performance issue. Therefore, we had to roll back. After a series of assessments, the project was cancelled. There were lessons learned from the project that are available for consideration. Here is a highlight of the Intranet Content Management project lessons learned. As a result of the performance issue, we had to roll back. The process of rollback involved canceling a deployment and brought the system back to its previous state before going live. Fortunately, we were able to roll back and buy time to determine the next steps. One of the main issues was the performance assurance. The project completed performance testing with 200 people who ran this website simultaneously. The performance was great with 200 people. When the website went live with over 2,000 people, the website was very slow and eventually stopped. One of the most vital activities was to make sure SharePoint was fast enough to meet the business requirements. When we got performance problems after going live, this could easily ruin all of the hard work. What we should have done was that we should identify the maximum load the service could take, the point at which we need additional servers, and the bottleneck such as network, SharePoint servers, and custom coding. There were several testing tools to ensure performance, but we didn't buy it due to the budget constraint. For example, Load Runner was a good tool, but it was pricey. Using the test tools, we could automate tests, including performance assurance. The other great side effect was that the tool enabled functional testing. Since the tool allowed automated testing, we could use it to repeatedly test the SharePoint application even after going live for maintenance and sustainment. Not every user used SharePoint in the same way. Some users download a document, some publish a document, some search for a document, or even some approved a document using workflow. The usage patterns were very important. They were likely to be, and also what the mix would be. We should have leveraged a pilot on the usage patterns before going live. For each test, we should record key elements, including and not limited to average user load, pages per second, requests per second, and average response time. We should have used the usage data from the pilot covering the SharePoint analytics and IIS logs. The usage data could provide an objective justification for additional budget and services to increase network bandwidth and add more SharePoint servers. Another area of learning is the customized coding and integration with other systems. Microsoft had already tested standard SharePoint functionality. If there were performance issues, they would have been well known and properly fixed. However, Microsoft couldn't test any customizations. With any customized programs such as web parts, event receivers, and custom pages, we should include the corresponding load testing. Integration with other systems like add-on workflows and email notification could be a high-risk area. Custom code and integration were the most likely cause to performance issues. Users may log in through different computers like PC workstation, MacBook, iPad, and even mobile devices. And they may use different browsers such as IE, Safari, Chrome, and so forth. It is critical to emulate different computers and browsers. We should conduct testing and match the computers and browser closely with the organization. My client had a challenge to maintain their mainframe system. My client had a mainframe system that served the land payment process for years. The land payment system enabled my client to compensate and pay the landowners on a regular basis in order to gain access to the right of way. A right of way usually describes a particular portion of a property in the urban area. My client typically visits the right of way a few times a year to maintain their facility on or nearby the property. Since the mainframe was lack of the user-friendly interface, expensive to maintain, and hard to find technical resources with the right experience, my client had to identify a new technology to replace it to prevent an increasing operating cost. A project was initiated to replace the mainframe system with a Java web-enabled application. We created a new land web-based application using agile methodology, including daily stand-up meeting, 2-week backlog, rotational scrum master, pair programming, co-location, and test-driven development. We successfully replaced mainframe system with a web-based application. Here is a highlight of the land application migration project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. Agile methodology was effective. We leveraged daily stand-up meeting in which we included business champion, business analysts, testers, and development team. We created a backlog tracking 2 weeks worth of activities in which we gather user requirements from business champion and track development activities. We had rotational scrum master who identified and managed deliverables for 2-week cycles. At the end of each 2 week, we had a demo to showcase the accomplishments as a working component of the land application. This provided an incremental learning to clients helping the change management. We had co-location. Our co-located team comprised of business analysts, testers, and developers that work at the same geographical location, in the same building, in the same room. This was handy in so many terms as it enabled the team members to interact formally and informally. It also provided the advantage of in-person coordination, problem solving, and learning rapidly. We also had pair programming and test-driven development to ensure communications and quality. Under the pair programming, we arranged 2 programmers working together at one station. One of them was the driver to write code, while the other was the navigator to review each line of code as it was typed in. Under the test-driven development, we wrote automated tests before produced code, worked with users to document test cases, and achieve quality by automated testing on a nightly basis. The pair programming and test-driven development ensure quality. Therefore, we were able to identify and fix defects early in the development cycle. This prevented expensive issues later in the project. The land champion was genuinely kind. When she supported the project, she also had her day-to-day business duties. It was amazing that she was able to strike a balance between the project commitment and operational duties. The project was fortunate to have the land champion who had decades of land experience on land payment and business domain. We wouldn't be able to make the achievement without the land champion. We stayed in touch throughout these years and maintained a great friendship. Team co-location was not an easy ask to have the same room to house 10 people. To make it happen, We had to let go of our own cubicle, which had ergonomic keyboard and split desk. Instead, we sat at a round table in a conference room without windows. We used laptops without ergonomic keyboard or setting. The business reality is that having all team members in a single room is next to impossible. But we were able to make it for 12 months. Another client with mainframe system was also faced with similar challenges. The operational and sustainment cost to mainframe system was expensive. It was also difficult to find the technical resources to maintain and sustain the legacy mainframe applications. A project was initiated to provide support to mainframe retirement program management, status reporting, and budget management. The project objective was to identify an overall mainframe requirements to create a roadmap for system retirement and estimate time and effort to complete the retirement. We applied a systematic approach to assess 31 mainframe applications and 1,700 mainframe programs in 2 months. We created a roadmap to assign the work to several projects and structure the projects with regular project status reporting and budget management. We completed the cost estimation for a $7 million program and provided ROI, return on investment, based on the lower operating expenses and reduced time for expensive mainframe upgrades. This project deliverable became the basis for program funding approval. Here is a highlight of the mainframe retirement project lessons learned. A number of positive findings were identified. They are meant to be repeated in the future projects. Mainframe is a large system hosting applications and handling high volumes of transactions. Mainframe is great for financial institutions. However, organizations depending on mainframe faced many increasing challenges. For example, mainframe is slow time to market. Launching new services takes too long. Mainframe had a rapidly aging skill pools. Many mainframe vendors have stopped supporting their platforms and putting business continuity at risk. Mainframe has a high maintenance cost. With the additional CPU capacity, memory priced as a premium, and business rules hard-coded, making changes is costly and time-consuming. It was the right decision to retire mainframe and make the transformation into web-based applications. Systematic approach for estimation was the way to go. We used the existing line of code in mainframe applications to predict the amount of effort to develop a replacement program. The line of code for estimation is a physical number that can be identified automatically through the program counter. So the manual counting effort was eliminated. The line of code was also an intuitive metric because it is a visible measurement to the size of a software. Therefore, it came in handy to express the size of a software among key stakeholders. The retirement program was supported by senior management, especially operational managers and their VPs. They understood the decision drivers, removed the objections, and make positive influence. Therefore, the business case was quickly approved, and the project had a strong ongoing support. However, due to the consolidation of the organization, there was a major reorg, resulting to a change of CEO in the midst of the project. It affected the decision to retire mainframe. Thank you very much for your time. Please contact me for additional project management templates and samples. Here's my contact information.